Welcome to section 2.2, rational equations. Let me start you off with a little mind-bending riddle here. So the question is, really, if you translate it into words, what number squared minus that number minus 20 is equal to that same number squared minus 25? And if you factor it out, what you do is you get x minus 5 and x plus 4. Remember, this is like the factor x, because negative 5 times 4 is negative 20, and negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. Factoring this side, this is the difference of squares, so we get x minus 5 and x plus 5. Well, check this out. Can't we just divide both sides by x minus 5? Yeah, we're going to divide both sides by x minus 5. That's something you can do. They cancel. And so therefore, and in fact, even I could write it like as a fraction, over x minus 5 over x minus 5. So when you divide both sides by x minus 5, they cancel out, and you're left with x plus 4 is equal to x plus 5. Subtracting x from both sides, you get 4 is equal to 5. What? That's not even true. How is that possible? Well, it turns out that what you've got to remember to do when you're solving equations like this is you've got to remember that when you're multiplying or dividing both sides by an expression like, in this case, x minus 5, well then, you have to say that the expression, like x minus 5, could equal 0 as a potential solution. On top of that, when you're multiplying or dividing by both sides by an expression, it could yield extraneous solutions, like extra values of x that aren't even going to work in the original equation. So you have to make sure you check all your answers. So actually, looking back at the first thing we have to remember, number one, the expression equals 0 could yield a solution. If that means that x minus 5 could yield a solution, then adding 5 to both sides, we get x is equal to 5. Does it actually work in the original? Is that one of the solutions? Let's check it out. Let's check our solution. Is 5 squared minus 5 minus 20 gonna equal 5 squared minus 25? Yep, they do. In fact, if we substitute in here 5 minus 5, is 5 minus 5 times 5 plus 4, is that going to equal 5 minus 5 times 5 plus 5? And the answer is yes, because they both evaluate to 0. 0 times anything is 0. I do that all just to say that when you're multiplying or dividing both sides by an expression that has an x in it, then make sure you remember that the expression equals 0 could be a solution, as it was here. And then also remember that you need to check all your answers. Now, before we tackle this wieldy beast, let me tell you what the strategy is. The strategy is going to be to clear the fractions. Nobody really likes to solve equations with fractions. It's way simpler and way easier to clear them first before you do really anything else. So we're going to multiply both sides by the least common multiple of all denominators. Some people call that the LCD, the least common denominator. By the way, as an audio check, did you know that the Earth is the third planet from the Sun? Newsflash, the Earth is the third planet from the Sun, and that's your audio check. So we're going to multiply both sides by the least common denominator. In this case, it's going to be x minus 5. So multiply this side times x plus 5. And over here, also multiply by x plus 5. They cancel. How convenient. Cancel. Now, whatever we get, we have to remember that when you multiply or divide both sides by an expression, that could yield one of the solutions. So one of the solutions could be what we get when we solve x plus 5 is equal to 0, which is... So one of the things we're going to have to check is maybe x could equal negative 5 in the original expression. Maybe that could be one of the answers. So we get x plus 4. When we cancel, we're left with x plus 4 is equal to negative 1. Subtracting 4 from both sides, we also get negative 5. We get negative 5 as a solution two ways. we better make sure we check it in the original. So simplifying the expression yields x equals -5 could be an answer, and remembering that when the expression equals 0 could yield a solution as well. So let's check. We've got to check. Let's see, we're checking -5 plus 4 over -5 plus 5 is equal to, is that really equal to -1 over -5 plus 5? We're going to run into some problems here because we get -1 over 0. Is that equal to -1 over 0? And honestly, we really can't trust this as an answer. I know it might look the same on both sides, but -1 over 0 and -1 over 0, as soon as you get zeros in the denominator, you have to just stop and say, no way, it's not going to work. -5 is not a solution. So are there any solutions? No. There are no solutions. I'm not even saying that 0 is an answer. 0 is not an answer. There are no answers. There's no solutions to this equation. 14 over x plus 2 minus 1 over x minus 4. The strategy is going to be multiply all the terms on both sides by the least common denominator. In that case, the least common denominator is x plus 2 times x minus 4. Now you might say, Bergman, how do you know that the least common denominator was x plus 2 times x minus 4? And it's very similar to if you had to subtract 1/2 minus 1/3. 5 over 6. To get the least common denominator, you just multiply 2 times 3. You get 6. 3 times 2. So you know that you can, it would be 6. Change these fractions into something. You could turn both of those fractions into something over 6. In this case, it would be 3, 6, and 2, so that's how I got it here. Multiplying. So if you multiply all three terms by the least common denominator, you get this. 14 times x plus 2 times x minus 4 all over x plus 2 minus 1 times x plus 2 times x minus 4 all over x minus 4 equals 1 times the least common denominator x plus 2 times x minus 4. Wow. You thought it looked like a wieldy beast beforehand. Now it just made it a whole lot more complex. But check this out. The reason we're doing it is because now we can cancel. Oh, canceling. The funnest part of Algebra 2, aside from getting the answer, has got to be just like ripping these. There we go. 14, what we're left with is 14x minus 4 minus 1 times x plus 2 is equal to, I'm just not even going to write the 1, x plus 2 times x minus 4. Great. Let's distribute. Let's get rid of all these parentheses. And we get 14x minus 56. Distributing the subtraction, minus x minus 2 is equal to x squared minus 2x minus 8. Combining some like terms, we get 13x minus 58 is all equal to x squared minus 2x minus 8. And now, let's set it all equal to 0. We get minus 13x on both sides. And we should also add 58 to both sides. What do we get? We get a big fat 0 on the left, x squared minus 15x plus 50. Factoring, we get a factor x that has 50 on the bottom, negative 15 on the top. You have to ask yourself, what two numbers multiply up to 50 and add up to negative 15? It's got to be negative 10 and negative 5. So therefore we get 0 is equal to x minus 10, x minus 5, and that means x minus 10 could equal 0, or x minus 5 could equal 0. Adding 10 over here, we get x equals 10, or x could equal 5. Now remember, in the original, we had x plus 2 and x minus 4 in the denominator. So we had to make sure that x plus 2 did not equal 0, and x minus 4 also did not equal 0. So therefore x should not equal negative 2, nor should x should not equal positive 4. We have to remember those things as meaningful replacements, or unmeaningful replacements. So we get x is equal to 10 or x equals 5. Those are the solutions, because they're not negative 2 and they're not positive 4. In the next example, the very first thing to do would be to factor the equation. And once we factor the right-hand side, we see we've got a difference of squares that yields x plus 5 and x minus 5. Great. The least common denominator is going to be x plus 5 and x minus 5. How do I get that? Well, it's very much like the equation 1/2 plus 1/3 is equal to x over 6. You realize that 2 times 3 is equal to 6, so a great thing to multiply all three terms by would be 6, just 2 times 3. Same thing here. And by the way, I realize I copied that wrong. This is x plus 5 in the denominator. So, multiplying all the terms on both sides by the least common denominator, x plus 5 and x minus 5, we get, and I will give you time to write this down, you get 4 times the least common denominator over x plus 5, plus 1 times the least common denominator over x minus 5 is equal to 1 times the least common denominator over x plus 5 times x minus 5. If you cancel, and canceling is, gosh, it's got to be one of the most fun things about Algebra 2, just crossing things out like crazy. You can cancel all of this, and we've arranged it to cancel. So what we're left with is 4 times x minus 5 plus 1 times x plus 5 is equal to 1. Distributing, we get 4x minus 20 plus 1x plus 5 is equal to 1. Combining the like terms, we get 5x minus 15 is equal to 1. 5x is equal to 16, and x is equal to 16 over 5. Now we have to check to make sure that when we substitute this in, we get the right answer. Because we have to make sure that x plus 5 is not going to equal 0 from the first denominator, and x minus 5 is not going to equal 0 from the second denominator. So x really can't be equal to plus or minus 5. And that's okay, we have made sure that it's not equal to plus or minus 5. X is definitely equal to 16 over 5. Let's check to make sure there aren't any extra solutions here. Let's just check our answer. And by the way, 16 over 5 is the same thing as 3.2. It might be a little easier to substitute a decimal. 4 over 3.2 plus 5 plus 1 over 3.2 minus 5 is equal to 1 over 3.2 squared minus 25. And if you type that all into a calculator, it checks out. Okay, so there's the section. Begin assignment 2B. I want you to write the heading in your composition book and do the first problem. By the way, as an audio check, did you know that the Earth was the third planet from the sun? I bet you already knew that, because I already told you. Take care, guys. I'll see you in class.